It is 4:30 right now, right?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
It is 4:30.
my answer. I have
Shannon, Melissa's not here. Greg's not here.
Ellen needs to sit down.
I'll send it to you.
All right, it is 4:30. Time to call the meeting to order. Bernie, can you do roll call for us, please?
Burton.
Here.
Chaney.
Here.
Hogan.
Here.
Carter.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Smith and Anderson are excused.
All right. It is time for public comments. If anyone would like to address the council, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak, and I will hit the button this time. The light will go green when you have enough time, yellow when there's 30 seconds remaining, and red when the time has elapsed.
I think the podium's not in the right place, but...
Right here.
So, sorry, the chair, sorry.
These chairs.
Okay.
Have a seat.
I have to change my script now a little bit, so yes.
That's okay. I can adapt.
Perfect, thank you.
Good afternoon. Randall Friedman, 1187 Northwest 10th. I've been involved in some planning issues. I'm trying to be productive, but there's something a concern of mine that I'd like to bring and a request for the council. The North Shore, I think I've talked with you. I've put my thoughts in the paper. I was very surprised at the planning exercise that was done, that the support for thinking out of the box, thinking beyond the North Shore area, and thinking about downtown, that got a lot of support at your tremendous think tank. I think it was a similar situation, that this is a city still very much committed to a downtown. My concern is that the current planning process is still centered on the North Shore in a vacuum without consideration. And some correspondence I got back seems to indicate that is going to continue unless you, the council, decide differently. So I'm here to ask you to do that. A lot has happened since this council made that decision, both in the mill, in an election, with our new faces. I think there's a lot of support in this community to take a second look at that. And the message I got from staff was they will only think beyond the boundaries of the North Shore unless you ask them to. So I'm respectfully asking you to consider my request to put that on a future agenda for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Randall.
Good afternoon, Jeff Snell, 4040 Southeast Harmony Place. I'm here as my role of superintendent of school district. I just wanted to come and publicly acknowledge Chief Lackey and the Camas Police Department for their efforts the last couple of weeks. We've had a busy time with a lot of different things going on, and I can just tell you that Chief Lackey and the police department were there throughout, really helping us sort through some really difficult things, and their professionalism and thoughtfulness is just greatly appreciated. And so I wanted to come down and publicly acknowledge your department. They do a great job. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
I forgot to hit the button that time, but it was okay. All right, any other comments?
Always been afraid Mary Beth's going to show up.
I even took notes. My name is Stacy McDonnell. I live at 1425 Everett Street. I am here to bring some positive mojo, which I have not brought in the past. And I'm sorry, and I see things differently. I'm looking from a different lens now. You guys are amazing. We are so grateful for everything that you do, your service to the town. You are here because you love Camas, just for the same reason that everyone in this room and probably in the hallway is too. There's a lot of people in the hallway tonight. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting my husband in his new role. This has been an exciting change and probably a little crazy for you guys as well, but to the department heads, holy cow, you have been so supportive of him. Connie, what a show you put on last week. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for making him feel comfortable, for being supportive of him, for being kind, and making this an okay place for him to be. Barry, thank you for your service to our town. Thank you for stepping up. Thank you for taking the lead and for following through. It's exciting to be married to you. It's exciting to watch you hold on to this town that we love. So thank you, sweetie.
Thank you.
All right.
I forgot to hit the timer again on that one, too. Any other comments? All right, workshop topics. We have some students here for our first topic. Sam, please tell us about Odyssey Middle School Stormwater Mural Project.
Sure. Mayor, Council. First of all, I wanted to introduce Jackie Caldwell. She's our stormwater engineer, and she manages our stormwater National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, or NPDS storm permit. And a big component of that is public outreach. It's a very big component for this year's, actually for our 5-year permit.
Right.
Add anything else?
Yeah, this is going to help with the public outreach portion, and there's students from Odyssey School, and this is Joy Garner, the teacher.
Joy?
They really have the presentation for you. Is there a best place for them to stand?
Just
Kind of here.
We can move
So
this
if we can,
chair.
Tyler, if you want to kind of go this way a little bit, bring our line over here.
And then we'll pass around a microphone too,
Oh, wonderful.
so that Joy, your voice is on record is why we want to do it.
Made this official.
Is it on? It is on. Okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to hand it over to our stewards here to talk about their hope for downtown Camas.
I want to thank you.
Is that on?
Absolutely, yeah.
There it is.
Sorry.
I want to thank you for giving the opportunity to consider our storm drain art.
We're going to start with introductions. My name is Maya Sampe. I am Lucy Janoskova. I'm Olivia O'Neill. I'm Ella Gonzalez. I'm Greta Bobadesqueta. I'm Marie Perger. And I'm Tyler Perkins. So we started this project way back in September when we first took tours of downtown Vancouver to look at all the amazing storm drain art that was done down there. And then skip ahead a little bit, we did a What's in Our Water project and learned about literally what is in our water, what's happening with like pollution, salmon, water health, fish health, aquatic health in general. And that inspired a lot of our projects and our products and our art that we did. I know that a lot of our projects here are inspired by the fish health and by the water health, which makes sense because that was our main focus of the project.
So mine is on the curb, and it says drains to river, and it's 3 fish swimming into the storm drain to be mindful of the pollutants, and then this is a close-up of what these would look like.
My art is of something I'm really passionate about or love a lot, mermaids, and they live underwater, so I thought it was a fitting topic. I wrote a poem that I'm going to put along with it. It is, if you feed the fish trash, you make us all sick with toxins and diseases no one wants to get. Pick up garbage, though it might not be yours. Keep our fish nice and healthy, a pretty clean outdoors.
Ours was inspired by the runoff into water sources that we use and animals use too.
So we decided to write All Pollution Comes Back to Us on our prototype because when stormwater runoff goes into like big bodies of water like lakes, rivers, and oceans, when it's polluted, it can make aquatic animals and organisms sick, and then we may end up fishing for those and eating them. So
my biggest concern was that caffeine, soft drinks, medicine, and personal care products are going to the ocean and hurting the fish and the animals down there. The quote I put on was, "Keep our oceans clean and blue, our planet green, and our animals safe." For my product, this is, as you're looking through the pipe that leads to the body of water, or the Columbia River, in case, you may see some salmon jumping out of the water because they're happy because the water is clean. And this is the bridge leading from Portland to Vancouver.
For my mural, I was inspired by the runoff that goes into our water to make a personified river human being person that basically shows the damage being done. And the person starts out okay, but then slowly becomes corrupted by the runoff. For my quote, I wrote, "If a single drop of oil can affect 1 million drops of water, then why can't one person make a small difference so it can inspire 1 million other people to change the world?"
What me and Wyatt did for our project is we drew 2 fish swimming towards a plastic bag, and they're swimming towards it because they think it's food, and tons of fishes die from plastic every year, so we're letting the people know that when they walk by that they're poisoning our fish. And as our quote that we made ourselves, we wrote, "Stop poisoning us."
Are there any questions we can answer for you?
You guys did such an awesome job. Well done with the presentation. How long did it take you guys to work on these?
So we started this project in September.
We started the entire project in September. Pretty much started it with a field trip. We didn't start this until a lot later we started the actual designs in January though.
And was there a field trip you were taking a look at other places that had painted them? And
Yes, that was.
And would you have favorite ones that you liked there, or did they inspire you to do your ones, or did you come up with your own ideas?
I had a specific one that inspired me. It was also a mermaid-like person whose hair was it was off of the sidewalk and it ran into the drain. I'm not entirely sure which artist did that, but I really liked it, and so I incorporated it somewhat into painting by making the hair blue and kind of upwards.
You guys all did a really nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I'll be providing these copies of these designs for council to look over more deeply and kind of, make comments and approval on it and whatnot, and then we can decide on further actions and how to implement this. So.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. Thank you. Anything on that project, Sam, before we go on to the next one?
Yes, we are going to use $500 out of our, we have a grant, $50,000 from Ecology we get typically every year, so we'll use some funds for that. Also would like to mention that we are in contact with the DCA, so we've been, just not going to spring anything on them here, so they know what's out there.
We'll show them the designs as well.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I love the idea. I think it's going to look great. I'm looking forward to it.
Great.
Exciting.
Thank you. Our next item is a professional service agreement with AKS Engineering and Forestry for 2022 boulder timber harvest. And Sam, can you please tell us about this?
Sure. This is just a continuation of our watershed management, timber management actually up in our watershed for Boulder and Jones. I've been at this is the 5th year for this. In this particular one, this is a little more challenging. There's a couple fish-bearing streams that we need to cross. And so the contract includes that design work. So we'll go to design this year, put it out next year, and probably do the timber harvest 22, maybe 22, but possibly 23, because I'll have to build all this stuff. before they go in. In addition, we're expanding a little bit more, so we get more timber and we get more money. Just to give you an idea, last year we brought in $180,000. In prior years, we actually brought in quite a bit more than that. This is in our watershed management plan, our timber plan. That is on our website. This is, well, perpetual. It's to get through all the harvest areas probably take 35 years, but then you'll just start right back over and keep going within our watershed. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
So each year when we harvest, we replant. 35 years later, we harvest again, and we just rotate through the 35 sections.
I got one question.
Sure.
Concerning site visits after the plants. Doesn't really say when those happen and who replants dead trees.
It would be the planters, the folks that we hire that plant these trees. And then AKS is on, they go out and look for 3 years after the first planting and monitor those trees. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I realize that this one's more complex with the streams and a bigger project, but in general, kind of how do the costs compare to our last couple harvests?
Typically, AKS is around $50,000, so this is quite a bit more, but there is that design work. They have to observe the creek and the streams during wet weather, and then they have to come back out in the summer and observe them again. And then, of course, there's permitting with the Department of Natural Resources, so there's a couple more components to this.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sam? Thank you, Sam. Looks like we're good.
Staff recommends this be put on the next consent agenda.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Carly, you want to tell us about the Northeast 3rd Avenue Bridge Seismic Retrofit Professional Service Contract Supplement Number 2?
That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
That was, and I'm
good job.
excited I pronounced seismic correctly, which is, yeah.
So I kind of wanted to give you an overview first of how we are, where we're at right now. We received almost $2 million in federal funds for these seismic retrofit improvements. Since we had our design team working on the design, they found some things that needed to be added to the project. Those things are listed in the staff report. But the soil conditions along the west abutment, we need to address that. And then we're doing some bridge deck modifications, which means we'll have to resurface the bridge, which means that then triggers water quality treatment. Currently, we're not treating the water there. It goes directly into the river, so this is a good upgrade that we'll be doing. And then, of course, with this extra work that we are looking at, it adds to the cost of traffic control, labor, and so those are the four main things that increase the cost of the project. So if you look at the chart, you can see that we've went from just over $2 million, a $2 million project, to almost a $3 million project. We asked the state if they would up our federal funding for this project, and we asked for an additional $892,000, and it was granted. So I guess the bottom line we look at is the local funds, basically for a nearly $3 million project, where we estimate that to be around $100,000. So if you pull your calculator out, you'll see that that's a pretty good, that's a pretty small match. This is all dependent on us getting out to construction in a timely manner, and we are well ahead of schedule to do so. They will cover 100% of the construction if we're out by a certain date, and we seem to be a year ahead of that. So this is an estimate, the $100,000. We will have to, of course, go out to add later, hopefully this spring or early summer. And so, but I bring this to you as an update of the project, and then we, of course, are looking for the proposed supplement 2 for HHPR to get us through design, and that amount is $33,200. And then we would come back with the construction services supplement as we get closer to construction. So we would put that supplement 2 on the March 2nd consent agenda for your approval. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
So first of all, great, thank you. Wonderful grant, getting that money. Question, when the work is done, how much of the road will be closed?
When the work's being done?
Yeah.
We are currently setting up the specifications to require a minimum of 1 lane in each direction at all times. So it could get a little complicated, but we're working on the details for the signal at 3rd and 2nd. The channelization, when we have to get the traffic over 2 lanes in that area. You got to get them back over before the signal, or we have to completely do something with the signal and the traffic control there. So it's a little tricky, but we're working on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Curly? Thank you very much. Next is relocation assistance ordinance for public works. Steve, you want to tell us about this?
Good afternoon. The revised Code of Washington, Chapter 8.26, covers real property acquisition and provides for fair and equitable treatment of people who have to get relocated as a result of a public works project. And it used to apply generally to projects with federal funding, but back in 2017, the legislature changed that to apply. They wanted to apply the rules to all public works projects for local agencies, not just those with federal funding, but basically any public works projects. And so, generally speaking, the city follows the WSDOT Uniform Relocation Act requirements and make sure that we're being fair and equitable to anybody that might need relocation or any negotiations for property acquisition in general. But the revised Code of Washington requires that we have a policy incorporated into our code that covers the act itself. And so the draft ordinance that you have in front of you essentially does that. It would incorporate those policies for relocation within our code sections. So kind of a cleanup item here in general. Sean, city attorney, has reviewed it, essentially drafted the ordinance and got it ready to go, and happy to answer any questions.
No questions? Anything else, Steve? Do you have anything else for Public Works or any updates?
Yeah, 2 or 3 miscellaneous updates for you. One, the Lake and Everett Roundabout project is being advertised for bids this week. So that's going out. Should be published in the paper tomorrow. I think will be the first publishing. The intent is to open up bids on March 10th and then bring it to council for award immediately thereafter. So that would be the March 18th meeting, and then move forward into construction as quickly as possible after that. Is it the 16th? Okay, thank you. A couple of things to note in the contract right now that thought we would get maybe a head nod on. We have incentives incorporated into the contract, and then also liquidated damages. And the incentives have to do with the phasing plan, as we talked about in the past. Being able to do a lot of the work outside of the current traffic lanes is one big benefit to the project, but that work has to be done timely so that they can get out into the travel lanes during the summertime when school is out, and try and get that work finished up to get the roundabout essentially functional, if you will, for traffic once school starts. And so we have 2 incentive periods incorporated right now. One is for the first phase, it's to finish that up by the end of July, and that would be a $15,000 incentive for the contractor. And then the second phase would be done before school starts, so in the August time frame, we would want them to finish that up, and that would be a $35,000 incentive. So there's, right now as written, there's $50,000 worth of incentives built into the contract. On the flip side, if the contractor is late and doesn't hit the August time frame, the second phase, the liquidated damages are $2,500 per day currently, and so that would add up, based on however many days past that deadline. So, project team thought those were fair numbers. It gives the contractor an incentive again to get in there and get out, get the work done in a timely manner. But also on the backside, if something happens and they don't make it, there's potential for liquidated damages. So.
And was there something around the tree as well, if they did damage?
Yeah, the chestnut tree, there's also liquidated damages, if you will, associated with the chestnut tree itself. So if they damage it somehow or something happens to the tree during the course of construction that has to do with work that the contractor was doing, there could also be liquidated damages on that. So.
Question?
Yep.
So there's 2 phases for the damages. Phase 1, $2,500 a day. Phase 2, $2,500 a day.
I believe the liquidated damages right now only apply to phase 2, but we.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
What happens if they miss the phase 1 deadline?
They have to make it up.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't get the incentive, so the incentive is gone. And then from a scheduling standpoint, right, we would have to work with them to make sure that they can meet the August time frame.
Thank you.
Yep.
How often do we use these types of incentives, and what is the outcome?
Yeah, bigger projects. The last one that we did this on was the North Shore sewer project. And so we had incentives built around the work in Ledbetter Road because we allowed them to close it. And then there was, I believe there were also incentives in Everett Street or SR 500 corridor for the similar reasons from a traffic standpoint. And it worked really well on that project. Contractor moved quickly and got the work done and was able to receive the incentives.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. A couple other things. I don't want to take too much time here. We have quite a bit on the agenda, but there's been a couple of questions on our legislative agenda with the session going on up in Olympia. I thought I would just briefly cover our message regarding the SR 500 corridor and the Everett Street corridor and North Shore. We, as you know, we had it on our legislative priorities list that we took up to Olympia, and it was an item on there that said we, essentially want to prioritize those routes, both the Everett corridor and the North Shore corridor. But we didn't specifically ask for any funding. What we did was conveyed the message to our legislators that, hey, we know this is important. We know this is likely going to be our next priority, but we're not asking for funding until we are certain that we have a good plan surrounding those projects and that we have a good scope and that we know exactly what we want to do. And then we'll come to the legislature and we'll ask for specific funding to be able to complete those projects. And that was something that we talked about with Lloyd. Howerson made sure that we had a good strategy in place, and really kind of goes back to the thought process that Camas in general has a really good reputation of asking for what we need and completing it on time and doing what we say we were going to do. And so we certainly didn't want to jeopardize that, but at the same time we did want to convey that those were priorities, and we want to make sure that our legislatures are aware of that. And it's kind of a, hey, this is coming down the road at you. Be ready when we get here. So. The last item I thought that I would cover is consultant procurement, if you will. So had some questions from the public as a whole, and then a couple of council members along the way, and we've talked about it a couple of different times, I think, at workshops in the past. But when we look for consultants, and specifically for engineering and architectural services, there are specific RCWs that apply to that we have to follow. And in Washington State, it is not a bid process, if you will. So professional services are not based on cost. So it's a QBS, so quality-based system, basically, or a qualification-based system. So it is totally based on qualifications. So when we send out a request for qualifications, it's just that. The consultants look at what we're asking for, they submit their qualifications, and that's without cost. So there is no cost included in a consultant's proposal when they give it to us for review. So then we go through the process, we look at what they submitted. Most oftentimes in bigger projects, we'll go through an interview process, so we might select 3 or 4 firms out of 6 or 7 or 8 that may apply. And then based on what they submitted and the interview process, we'll score each of the firms, and then we pick what we deem to be the most qualified firm. And then from that point, you begin negotiations on the cost proposal with that specific consultant. So I think a lot of people get it confused with the construction process, which is clearly you advertise for bids, contractor gives you a number, and you essentially take the lowest bid, that's responsive and responsible, and then you move forward with construction. So the engineering and architectural process is a little bit different from that because it's all based on qualifications. The other aspect to that is that there's a couple of different ways you can do it. One is that you do a formal advertisement. You say, consultants, here's the project. This is what we're looking for. They send you the qualifications, right? And we go through the process, and then we pick one based on the advertised request. The other way to do it is that once a year we can advertise a general time period for which consultants can submit qualifications to us, and they can actually submit whenever they want to, essentially. And we put them on a roster, and it's a professional services roster or a consultant roster, and that kind of helps speed things up a little bit. It makes it so that you don't have to advertise for each specific project. You can actually look at the roster, see who's qualified, and kind of jump straight to that phase where you can either select or you can pull people in for interviews, but it gives you a little bit quicker way to get through the process. Typically in Camas, on a bigger project with federal funding or grant funding, most of the time we have to advertise and go through the more formal process. On smaller kind of on-call type projects, or less technical, less cost, we will typically use the roster to try and move those projects forward and be able to get things done as efficiently as possible. Because the RFQ process that you advertise for and that they submit on is one that takes a lot of effort and time on both parties' parts, and oftentimes the consultants, they want to know that there's a good project at hand that they might have a shot at if they're going to take the time and the effort to submit a formal statement of qualifications that's multiple pages that they're spending marketing time on and that they're trying to really chase a project. So I thought I would just bring that up because we have been getting questions. Hopefully that makes sense, but more than happy to do a bigger presentation on it if anybody would like. So.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Any other questions for Steve? You're good, Steve? Thank you. The next item is the 2020 City of Camas fee schedule update. Cathy, can you walk us through this? You got a presentation?
Good evening, Council, Mayor. So we're bringing back an update of the 2020 fee schedule. I think this is version 2 or 3, but I think this will be good for a while. This is the first thing that we decide to do is, this is a little bit of a change, and staff got together with the building department, and we are trying to, in lieu of having the new system in place for online permitting, one way of automating it a little bit is to do things more through email. So one of the things we decided to get rid of was to look at deleting the impact fee credit and the impact fee credit transfers. They're $56 that's in the fee schedule as it is today, and then instead add an administrative residential permit process an admin fee, if you will, for $56 across the board. That way, they can just have that built into the fee structure. It also helps us recover some costs that are in the finance department that are not necessarily have been addressed historically through the building permit process. So everything from the banking to the credit card processing to the staff time would be covered, we feel. So essentially, this is purely for a virtual transaction cost recovery. Another thing that we realized when we were looking at it, staff has brought to our attention, was that we are not getting full cost recovery for the engraving at the cemetery. So this will help us do that. So it's purely at cost. The city's not, it's not something that's being a revenue generator as much as it's just covering our costs, because our margin there is so slim as it is anyway, and the city still has some subsidy going on up there. These four were ones that we had accidentally missed in the updates, so those are there now. And these are ones where when we did the code update, we took them out of code, but they didn't get put on the fee schedule, so this just puts it on the fee schedule. Okay. So that's quick review, and we would bring it to you next meeting. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So it sounds like most of this was sort of cleanup.
Just cleanup. Yeah, mostly, and making sure we're doing, again, we're going to be doing more cost, and we'll be doing more work where my goal is to start looking at each of these departments and Catrina and I can go through and just look at them and say, look at the different fee structures and at least make you aware of how much it's being subsidized and how much is not, how much is it full cost recovery, and get council's policy direction as to where you want, because each department's going to be a little different, where you would want to do full cost recovery and full not. And we did a little bit of that when we were doing the park and rec fees and the rental rates. So we'll move on to the other areas soon. So.
Do we compare our costs with other cities also?
We do in some areas. So, for example, Parks and Rec, we know we do some market studies there. Cemetery, we did do some market studies on that one as well. And so we do some. All right. I have one more for you, and it'll be really quick too. This one's we're a little bit, just to give you a little context, I attended this meeting at the City of Vancouver for the 2020 census. We're a little bit behind other cities, but we're going to catch up really quickly with the teamwork that we have on staff. The library's already got a little bit a jump, helped us with a little bit of what they've already done already, and we got a lot more we got to do. So this is, I'm sure you're already very aware, there's a lot at stake. Perfect example is right now it's amazing how much these numbers ripple through a lot of what we do as a city. And so the population counts are incredibly important for a number of reasons. It also allows us to everything from grant applications to state funding to federal funding. A lot of it's based upon those election count, those census counts, as well as the projections OFM uses for those as well. It also helps us with anything that we may, from any of the districting for the House of Representatives, which is on here too, who represents us. So we could, in theory, Southwest Washington may be underrepresented at this point because we have really exploded as a community. So the census will take place in the spring. They're counting everybody as of where you are April 1st of this year. So, and then for the very first time, it'll be available online. So that just hold on to that thought, because I'll be back to that in a minute. And the next time, what's also exciting is that it's available in 13 languages. So for some communities, that's really critically important, because those groups sometimes are underrepresented. So it'll be online, phone, and mail will be the ways of doing it. They are saying that they're going to have it highly secure for the people that would go on and do their counts. You'll receive a postcard April 1st, and that will allow you to go into the website so that you can do your household. The timeline will be starting April 1st, then they'll do door-to-door starting June and July. December 31st will be when they report everything back to the president, and they can start looking at the apportionment of the accounts. So it's highly important, obviously. And the benefits, I already talked about that. $675 billion gets divvied up based upon that count. And then also, we're not the only ones. Businesses use those numbers as well. So these are some of the areas where the census numbers are used just in our city. So what can we do as a community? Our role as a city is to get the word out, and I have contacts with folks that will provide us the information, flyers, posters, all that. So we're going to start getting the word out in all our social media. We're going to look at hosting what are called questionnaire assistance centers, because since there is online, if people would rather do that instead of doing mail or something like that, they can come in. We could have a computer available both in City. I'm going to train my staff, so it'll be at the front counter in City Hall. I think we talked about the library helping out with that as well, and having staff available to help people answer the questions that they may have on that. And those other ideas are other ideas that that Vancouver helped us troubleshoot too, because they have a whole squad of people working on it already, so they were helping out, and so they would give us any of their materials for us to use as well to get it out, the words out there. So I think that's it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or you can email me and let me know if something comes up. But we'll start getting the word out pretty heavily here in the next month.
What is the projection of how many people or what percent of the population they expect will respond online?
They did not give us that, what they think that is. At least I'm not aware of what that number is, but I could take a look and see if there's a number out there yet.
It would definitely help us plan for how much help we have to have.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
As follow-up, do you know, are they going to give us an update, say late April, about, for staffing reasons, about how many did go online and sign up?
I'll find out more information about that whole online piece. Okay.
And has it been tested is the other question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
And I should have mentioned earlier that you may have heard that the count has actually already started for some communities. So they started out with a homeless population first. Then now they're doing some of the other communities, like some of the disabled communities, and the ones that are that they can do more hands-on accounts with. And so they're doing those right now. But April 1st is the general population. It'll open up to all the communities. And we'll be also I'm trying to also get information about our census tracts and see if there's ones that we think might be underserved, and see if we can target those areas as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for taking this project on as well, Cathy. Appreciate it. All right, next item, Sarah has an update on the Shoreline Master Plan.
Good evening. So tonight, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how we're moving forward with our periodic Shoreline Master Program update. In the packet, I provided a few things for you. I wasn't planning to go through any of those in detail tonight. I only had two things to talk to you about tonight. One of them was in the staff report, I talked about the public outreach consultants started in January, and they've put together just a draft so far. I asked them not to continue fine-tuning that design just yet because I wanted feedback from staff and council, whether or not what they're looking for is, does that have the feel of our shorelines? Does that, feel like Camas? Is there any sort of feedback that you would have on that drawing? And if you don't have anything to say tonight, you can always send me an email too, but I was holding off until I got feedback. They also included a draft of kind of the finer points of what sort of items would be updated in our master program, kind of talking points. And the plan is within the next few weeks to update our webpage, because so far the information on the webpage is just generated from staff, some of our early work of just putting out the dates of our technical advisory committees meetings and when our first initial draft would be released. So the next step is to kind of hand that update over to this team because they write better than we do and they have nicer pictures. So they will take over the public outreach portion from this point forward. And the plan too is to finalize some of the open house in April, finalize when that date will be and when we'd be going to Planning Commission, kind of that first round of drafts. So that's kind of our next steps. And then the other part that we really needed to talk about tonight was on the kind of the Shoreline Master Program update checklist that was part of your packet. Included all the mandatory updates from the state, and they went all the way back, till basically our last update and forward, and made sure that our city was up to date on all of the changes. And so staff had put in the right column kind of whether or not we needed to update that, whether or not it was already updated. So we filled out that checklist and provided it in your packets. But at the bottom of that checklist was what staff had begun saying, okay, here's some other changes that we've found working with it, since 2012 was the last major update. Here's some things that we found that were hard to work with. The fact that some items such as dock and ramp lengths were items that individuals would always have to ask for a variance to. And so we were proposing changing that so that we would have less variance requests, matching more of our conditions on the river. Things like, I actually sent out this initial draft to Ecology for some review, and one of the comments I knew was coming was, why are you changing the size of the piers in the river? And so I was able to explain to her that in the Columbia River, all of our engineers have said, they need to at least be 12-inch diameter. So the fact that it says they can only be 4-inch diameter, an applicant always has to ask for a variance to that standard. So those are some of the changes that we were proposing in our kind of the things that aren't required by law, but to make our code more usable for us and not need as many variances. And then the other change was more substantive, and that was a discussion that we had with the Technical Advisory Committee during most of our time that we spent together in 2 meetings, which was discussing the whether or not to continue having a Shoreline Management Review Committee. Going into some research and talking to the staff at Ecology, it turns out that they can't even really think of more than a few cities that have that sort of a review body, either a board or a committee, where permits go to them first. So that's one thing. We're kind of rare that we have that commission. And then the other reason is most of our land use permits either are we review them and issue decisions from staff, what we call administratively, or they're at a level where they need to go to our hearings examiner. And then, as we know, there's a few that do go through Planning Commission and City Council. But the proposal is that we would have a lot more. We do have a lot more permits that we would consider administrative, which are not to get too technical, but that's the shoreline substantial development permits, where the project doesn't need a variance, doesn't need a shoreline conditional use permit. They've met all of our requirements in code, so it's very straightforward. And so staff could issue the decision, and then the proponents could move forward. Either they have usually a site plan that goes with that, or they have a building permit. There's other permits usually attached to those permits, but the shoreline part of this permit could be administratively approved without the need of convening a meeting. And then the projects that do require the variance or the shoreline conditional use, they would go to a hearings examiner and have a public hearing for that portion of the project. And so that's the main proposal, is to make those changes. And so a lot of the changes that you see in that Appendix B are all about changing out that process. Let's see. I could keep describing this, or I could just pause and ask if you have any questions.
So does the Shoreline Management Review Committee have a history of making important changes that weren't caught before, or do they rarely ever come up with anything that changes the previous step?
Right. So in the years that we've had the Shoreline Management Review Committee, the current process right now has every shoreline substantial development permit, even if it has a variance or conditional use, has to go to them. And usually the bulk of these permits are, because they're on the shoreline, Georgia Pacific permits. The process requires that a large 4x8 sign go up right next to whatever's happening, and it could be they're just repaving a portion of their road. That happens a lot. They're replacing a piece of equipment, maybe one of their pumps in the river has gone out, and but these projects are not exempt from a permit because they've exceeded that cost threshold. And so as far as noticing, there's the large sign. All of the property owners within 300 feet of that project get a notification. And what else happens? Oh, it's on our website. It's posted in the library. So we've let many people know that this meeting is going to happen. Typically, no one shows up. We might have one individual, maybe two property owners phone and talk and ask some questions. So the bulk of these permits, the meetings are attended only by the Shoreline Management Review Committee and the applicant, and maybe their engineer comes as well. So, bringing that to your attention. And then on the occasions where it's a project that is perhaps there's a dock going in. Usually our dock projects have a little bit more public interest. Neighbors are more interested in it. Those projects, we've had two of them where the Shoreline Management Review Committee has realized that it's beyond the scope of their public meeting, and neighbors have shown up and want to speak, but it's a public meeting, not a public hearing. And so the Shoreline Management Review Commission, they have to decide either they can make a decision on the permit at the meeting, or they can refer it to a public hearing in front of the hearings examiner. So that means there's another date that has to be set for a public hearing, and that's happened twice, I think.
So if we eliminate the step of the review committee, thank you, then does it directly go to a hearings examiner? Is that the bypass? Did I hear that right, or is that not?
Only the permits that require a shoreline conditional use permit or a shoreline variance would go to the hearings examiner, or I guess in the discretion of our community development director, if it was a project that caused a lot, we'd know right away, folks that get their letter in the mail, if we started getting phone calls, if there was something that rose to a level that looks like it needed, like people wanted to testify on the project, then it could also be forwarded to the hearings examiner.
And just out of curiosity, last time I was over at Georgia Pacific, they said they were going to pull out 2,000 structures out of the river. Do they have to do this 2,000 times?
I would suggest that they don't do it 2,000 times. But that I haven't heard about this project yet. But if it came to me, we'd probably look into doing one permit for that entire work of pulling out the 2,000 things. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sure Georgia Pacific is thankful too.
Any other questions for Sarah? Ellen?
Could you just briefly go over why we do this, how often, and who was on the technical advisory committee? I mean, I was part of that, but I was impressed with the background of some of the other members.
Starting with the committee. So we, because this is a mandated update, as I was mentioning, the first step was deciding how much of a scope of an update we really wanted to do. And so looking at the Shoreline Management Review Committee was part of that extra step, and whether or not we wanted to do some of these other changes like the dock standards and whatnot. Knowing that these are very detailed, very specific issues to review, we put together a technical advisory group that made up of individuals that have actually had shoreline permits through the city. And so we have 2 consultants that have volunteered to join the committee from different firms. We have one member from the Georgia Pacific firm that attends the committee. Again, a person who's done a lot of permits, shoreline permits in the city. And we have a planning commissioner represented on the technical advisory committee and 1 city council member. I think that's everybody. Oh, sorry. And we have a Parks and Rec commission member, and also in the meantime of having Parks and Rec, she also was elected on our Port Commission. So, and then what was the rest of your question?
It was just how often, that was pretty much it.
Oh.
I mean, it was a good group.
Right. So the idea was, to bring
Expertise.
all that expertise together so it could really have some really in-depth discussions on everything that is in that chart. We looked at every change, discussed it. They put forward, that's why there's 2 options in the staff report, because one option was removing the Shoreline Management Review Committee. The other option was actually expanding the committee. That was something we discussed, which was right now it's required just to have 4 members of the committee, and that's you have the Community Development Director, who's ex officio, a Planning Commission Chair, the Parks and Rec Commission Chair, and a City Council person. And those are the only people that make up our Shoreline Management Review Committee. And committee. And so the idea was to add some and really specific expertise if we were to appoint some more members to the committee, those that actually have a degree in biology or hydrogeology or something along those lines. We could be specific about recruiting some more members to that committee. And then the third option is just to leave it as it is, and staff will undo those red lines and we'll just move forward with the other changes. So that's what we're looking for tonight, is some direction as to, so we have a version that you're comfortable with moving forward through this process.
Someone else might have the same question that I had asked you earlier today about we're hiring a public relations firm to do the marketing, and my question to you is, why don't we wait until we hire our own public relations person and then let them do this? And why can't we postpone this whole thing until then? Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So the update's required every 8 years, and our last update was 2012, and the city applied for a grant, and one of the incentives for accepting the grant was that the Department of Ecology would allow us an additional year to complete this process. So our deadline is now 2021. Their purpose for providing the grants was to help cities with expertise that some cities don't have, the technical expertise, and outreach, public outreach, to have a more robust outreach process. And our city accepted the grant. We were awarded the grant. We accepted the grant, and our grant application was for public outreach support. And so that's why we're able to move forward before hiring someone, is because we hired some consultants to help. And then we have a deadline as well. So they've given us an additional year, but that means we do need to be done, pretty much wrapped up with our amendments by the end of the year.
Thank you. Okay. So we have a grant to fund that firm.
Right. I'm forgetting the exact amount, but I think it was about a little over 20,000. Yeah, it wasn't a huge grant, but it's enough to do the work that we described, which was helping us with, with the messaging and the imagery, and just so it's very clear what this project is.
Don?
Who's our shorelines committee person on the council now?
Me.
You are. I just make a comment. For me, I was on it for probably 5 years, maybe 6 over the last 12, and I didn't particularly like going to the meetings, quite frankly, but I also got a sense that even though there wasn't public testimony, the public that had issue had an opportunity to submit documents and positions in writing that could be considered by this, that modified the recommendations that staff had. And I'm just, as much as I didn't like going to those, I think it's a layer that the public has an opportunity to influence peers as opposed to bureaucrats. And I don't mean to disparage a bureaucrat because they have a process, but there are times when I felt like we made changes in process through conditions and so forth. Ellen, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And so I'm reluctant to take that layer away unless it's such a burden on staff to prepare for and conduct those meetings. That's my position on that.
Okay. How often did you have to meet?
3 times a year, maybe.
Yeah, it
Depending on
depends on. Yeah, it definitely depends on the years. We've had some busy years where we've had, at least one a month, even some years. This year, I think we only have a couple planned so far, so it really does depend.
As needed.
Yeah, as needed. And it is, also looking at the stance of the applicant as well. That was another thing we discussed, was what is the value back to the applicants if no public shows up or weighs in or calls or even acts interested in the project. What is that purpose of that meeting? Like I said, if they're for things like shoreline conditional uses and shoreline variances, we would have a public hearing. So that would be very clear what the process is. And what we're also describing is when the public shows up at a public meeting, we kind of create our own little process because it's not required to allow them to speak, but they're here. So we say, you're here, you showed up, please let us know what your concerns are. And so it kind of made a process out of those meetings to allow for the public.
Hi, Phil. Phil Burquin, Community Development Director. So a couple of things I just want to touch on is that shoreline management programs it's a mandate, goes back to the 70s, I believe. City of Camas has always updated and been on track with keeping our shoreline management program up to date. The stuff that Sarah's talking about this evening is low-hanging fruit in terms of being in compliance with the 14th goal of GMA, the Growth Management Act, which the shoreline management program is, the 14th goal. Since we've done such good, solid updates in the past, 2012 being the last one where we partnered with Clark County, Vancouver, and many cities in this county, we took additional steps the last time to hire specific biologists to work locally to look at our conditions. We did some updates around the mill property that went to natural areas instead of industrial or heavy, I forgot the exact terminology, but rather than high intensity uses, they went to natural uses. So there's things like that we've done. Because of that, this update, we're working on low-hanging fruit. These are just minor issues or minor tweaks to a program that's already a mature program in this state. And I just was talking last week with Department of Ecology and some of the heads of Department of Ecology who are giving us kudos for the efforts that we do on our shorelines and our critical areas as well. So I just thought I'd put that out there, and I want to say thank you to Sarah because she's done a phenomenal job over the years on our shoreline regulations and and keeping us on track. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Sarah for her leadership because she brought up the whole team to speed really well. She had all the documents prepared, noted. The matrix you put together about what had changed and why was so easy because it was about thick to read. And I agree with Phil and support your recommendations for those low-hanging fruit. They were mostly improvements or cost value increases because the cost of goods have gone up for docks and so on. So they're very pragmatic just to keep things safe, water quality high, and make it efficient for the property owners. So it was a good balance. So for me, I think the outstanding question is whether we keep the committee and perhaps add a little more expertise on the technical side, or if we move straight to the hearings officer.
Don't we have 2 committees in there, a review committee and then the committee? Aren't those 2 separate?
It's a review committee. It's just one.
Just one.
But
Okay.
here's my thoughts on that: is that it's a question that came up, and then let the process, go through. Let's hear from the public. Let's hear from the development community or anybody else that wants to weigh in on it, and then collaborate and listen to all that and figure out what the right way to go on it is. On that specific issue, as well as all the issues that have been brought up.
Right. Well, I was. So the idea was if there was a lot of opposition to this, then we would just take it off the table and move forward with keeping the Shoreline Management Review Committee intact. Just make it simpler for us if we don't want to tackle that right now. If we do, then great, we'll continue with the draft that we have and move forward, like I said, to the different public meetings, public hearings we have coming up in the next few months. Or I could come back and we could talk about this some more before we plan to take this forward to open houses or other workshops as well. If you'd like to talk about this some more.
Thoughts?
If it's going to go into public hearings and the public has a chance to come in, the vested people probably will show up.
Yeah.
And that would be my thought. Is take it down that route.
Okay. So
even if at the end of the day it ends up being the same, it's
all right. Okay.
Fine.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping I would get some direction on that. All right. And I have a move forward. Okay, so I have one kind of out of order, but I have a miscellaneous update.
Let's go to the mayor. The next item was Robert giving an update, but
City Hall.
We have one miscellaneous update, and if we can just do that.
Go for it.
A bit out of order, so Sarah can. Thank you.
Okay, so our 2020 annual comprehensive plan updates. The window for applications closed on January 31st. We received 2 applications this year. So one of them is called the Lofts at Camas Meadows. It's a comprehensive plan and rezone application. It's located on Camas Meadows Drive. It's 4 acres. It's currently, the comp plan is industrial and the zoning is business, light industrial business park. Their proposal is to change it to commercial with a zone of community commercial. And the second application that we received is called the Mills Family Comprehensive Plan Change. It's located just north of the old Wildlife League. They own, in this proposal, is 57 acres. It currently has a mix of business park, multifamily 10, and multifamily 18. Their proposal is that it's a split of just 2 zones moving forward. It would be a multifamily with multifamily 10 on 35.5 acres and multifamily 18 on 22 acres. And they'd also like to modify our transportation plan with a Northeast Fargo Street extension. These parcels are landlocked. And then our third one, well, we have a third one, but it's not really a comp plan amendment. It's a capital facilities plan update for the Washougal School District. So the plan moving forward would be to bring these forward to Planning Commission in March for a workshop so I can introduce them to the projects as well. And then we'll work with the applicants and hopefully have public hearings in April, May timeframe. And then work with you on your agenda items as well. All right, that's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil and Sarah. Robert, you want to give us an update on the City Hall Annex building?
Love to. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Actually, we really appreciate your time, and because I know I've had some conversations with some of you as we've been diving deep into this. As I put in my staff report, at the beginning of the year, with some changes here at City Hall, Mr. Burquin was tasked with taking on the remodel the annex building across the street, and handed that responsibility over to me to get into the meat and potatoes of it. But really, it's been a we effort. Steve Wall has been awesome with his ops staff. The IT department, Tony and Joe, have been fantastic in helping us get up to speed on needs, because while we were involved early on with design charrettes and things like that, just to assess what sort of departmental needs would be necessary, there really hadn't been a whole lot of interaction with department heads or staff as to how the design was progressing and things like that. So we had a meeting with LSW Architects early on. LSW was chosen earlier last year through our small works roster to do some of the basic block building, if you will, which then led to putting the proposed contract that went to council in October. But when we met with them, it was this very room, and we went over in detail sort of what's included, what does this get us, so we could be up to speed. Because in December, for instance, they had met with staff to talk about the design that was sort of cultivated from all this, and right away we had noticed some things that were missing, like a permit counter, and separation from having some security between public and staff workspaces and things like that. We were also looking at the inspection report that was put together before we purchased the building, and there's a number of items listed on there. Bottom line is that there are some additional changes that staff is going to recommend that we move forward with. We don't have total numbers for you yet because we're still waiting on some of these from various consultants, like Three Kings Environmental, for instance. And even the way the architect works, they have subs that they work with in order to get us some ideas of what, maybe an envelope space for the building. For instance, there are a couple areas where there's some water seepage and things like that. But everything we've been looking at are solvable items, but we want to have a complete picture for council in terms of the cost, because we want this to be a successful project because it needs to be functional. We want it to be able to serve the community for what its intended purpose is, for a permit center. Nothing's extravagant in what we're looking at, but it's necessary in our opinion. So, some of the items that we've been looking at as an example, I mentioned the workspace for the front counter. Those are add-ons from where the contract was established in October. So, anything added on after the fact then is not only added consulting management for it, but also construction costs. But some of it's pretty routine, like what you would it's a almost 70-year-old building, so there's going to be some stuff to be expected with some roof maintenance, handrails that were fine back in the day but might need to be modified now. There's, roof drain out of place, and then some of the other items that you would expect in something that old, but asbestos and lead testing, make sure that if there is any of that present, that we can accommodate remediation appropriately. So our hope is to actually, in the next council meeting, we would have some numbers. Because I can't control getting some of these back, at worst it would be a meeting after that, but really we hope to come back first meeting next month. In terms of the schedule, we're in the driver's seat on that right now. Based on the way the contract was put together, we're in the area where we're refining the plans, and the next step would be, assuming everything was good to go, they would prepare final documents, so we would go out to bid. The way this works is that LSW prepares the bid set. Steve's department would actually go out to bid like we would any other public works project. Rhonda's already been on top of that. And we would go out to bid for the construction piece of it for the building, and then separately there'd be a bid package for furniture items. And furniture items, that's actually is well within the norm of what we'd already anticipated in terms of the budget. We're even looking at trying to see what we're moving over from over here across the street. We're looking at savings from not buying a bunch of new filing cabinets, for instance, because we can repurpose ones that we already have. Just simply box up some of the documents, send it to archiving, things like that. So, and that's been involving staff downstairs. So it really has been kind of a we approach to this. But I'd be happy to answer questions that you have at this point. I know there's a lot of moving parts with this, and we're still getting our arms around some of this as well.
I'll try to summarize this a little bit. So the next expectation is that we'll come back with a comprehensive list of costs. Those that were initially part of the package or the what's it called that the current
just the current
grant,
contract.
But the things that we've identified since then that weren't wrapped into that. So we want to have a good comprehensive list of that. We'll also try to have a comprehensive list of other items, things that we wouldn't anticipate as part of this. For instance, like the parking lot and how the parking lot gets re-looked at in the future. That it might be something that we at least put in, some kind of a list, maybe not a number to it, but that's something that's not, so the expectations are clear that wasn't something that we're doing, but there's something that perhaps we should look at doing in the future. So we're trying to get that as clearly articulated as possible. One thing I will also add is that because this is a permit center, use of funds, the revenues that come in through our building department, which have to be used for specific purposes related to providing that service, are funds that are available to help pay for the improvements in this, and that's something that we're working with Cathy closely on to make sure that everything is going to be funded appropriately at the end of the day. So our hope is to come back, have a very clear plan of what the costs are, what we're doing, and be able to move forward and get the project completed. So, okay.
Questions for Robert or Phil around the building, the annex building?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one. You just mentioned, it sounds to me like we're kind of looking at a phased approach, because we'll put together a bigger list now that we have more information. Some's got to be done, like asbestos and lead and water and drainage and dry rot and things, and then we'll defer some of the furniture purchases, and then we'll look for other savings as they come up.
Absolutely.
We want to come to a package that gets us occupying the building
right,
in an effective, efficient manner without having to go back and forth multiple times.
Okay.
What we're trying to say is there may be other things that are add-ons in the future that you look at, and if there's cost savings, we're going to try to mitigate those with, for instance, using filing cabinets in the basement or something like that. Those weren't part of the original budget or original proposal. So we want to look at those things that are part of the original proposal. What do we need to do to fulfill the contract that we have, and then what are the costs to get us in there fully? That's really
great.
What we're after. Yeah.
But I have found some items that are easy ones, like blinds. That's something that we could do at a later date, but they're they line item amount, and those are trying to ferret out some of that
Thank
stuff.
you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment, and I don't think we're talking about communications and need to communicate to the public better. I don't think we've done a good job explaining to the public from start to stop the reason we acquired this building and our intentions, and I think we need to figure out a way to do that, because I still get questions, even as recently as last week. And as I recall, the purpose was to acquire the building because it was available and in theory saved us tens of millions of dollars possibly in trying to relocate and identify a location and purchase a new or construct a new city hall that would accommodate everybody. This so happened to be located just across the street from our existing functions, and even though folks think we spent a lot of money, it was a matter of acquiring it or not acquiring it, and we did that. And so I hope that somehow we can think about, Mr. Mayor, looking at a way to consolidate this information so that the community understands exactly what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. And it really it's to be efficient and have proximity and to save money in the long term and the larger term. There's going to be a longer term when eventually we'll probably outgrow both facilities. But right now, I think we might have missed the mark in communicating to the public exactly our purpose and what we're trying to achieve here. And when we get asked to spend an extra $10,000 or $15,000, it's a challenge, certainly, any money we spend. But in the end, we want to make it right so that it's viable for the next, I don't know, I'm just grabbing some years, 15 years, 20 years maybe, hopefully. And so I just like us to maybe, with our pending or temporary process, maybe ask our communications person to communicate, maybe through staff collaboration, and get that message out to the public. I mean, they're fair questions that the public ask us.
Do you want to reach out to Alicia then, maybe?
Absolutely.
Talking about that?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And then Phil, have you got anything else for? All right. Easy. Jennifer, you're up next. On-call communication services professional service agreement with PBS Engineering and Environmental Incorporated. Can you tell us about this?
Yes. Hi.
Thank you.
So, what you have before you is a professional services agreement with PBS Engineering to provide us with consulting services related to communications. The agreement is not to exceed $50,000 and not to go beyond 6 months. So this was, this agreement was made up intending to cover the time between now, excuse me, and when we have the newly, a couple weeks ago created the new position, Communications and Community Relations Manager position, which we're going to hold off filling until later this year. So this is intended to fill that gap. This will allow us to maintain the continuity that we have currently with the person who's been doing our communication over the last couple of years.
It's a pretty awesome ringtone.
Sounds terrible.
Is that Phil's fault?
I think so, it's Phil. This is also on the consent agenda this evening, just in the interest of getting it executed so we can continue on with Alicia. So, and if there was any need to change it, extending the time or the changing the money or anything, we would definitely let council know prior, but I envision this should be enough time for us.
Any questions on that? No. And the next is the elected official code of ethics and conduct draft.
So, before you have a draft of a document that was discussed at the planning conference. Placed on the agenda at the request of the mayor. At the time of the planning conference, it was stated this would be on a workshop for future discussion. So this is just one example of a policy that council may consider, which expands on an already in place RCW 4223, which lays out a code of ethics for municipal officers that currently applies. The RCW is in place and applies no matter what. I believe at the workshop there was discussion of whether or not council would want to do something more detailed. So this is the kind of policy that all electeds would get a copy of when they came on board, along with all the other city information. In the meantime, I guess I think it was just to open it up for your discussion. Again, keep in mind it's just one example of a policy that could be.
And this is the Vancouver one, right? It was just the one
this
that
is based on
Vancouver
Vancouver's,
did.
with changes specific to Camas, yeah. So if, I assume that's, you all can discuss and come up with whatever we want to do, if there's any future direction for staff on this, or where we'd like to go from here.
One of the questions that, and I've talked to Mayor about it, that occurred to me, and I think, Mayor, you encouraged me to talk to the city attorney about my question.
He's the best person to ask when it comes to anything.
And I think we got good advice. I saw him email. I saw Shannon actually had the same questions that I did about how do we enforce this on folks who are ex-officials. How can you fine or penalize an ex-official? And rather than elaborate, I think that's pretty intuitive. There's no teeth to do that. If we're to adopt this and try to implement that, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And the city attorney's advice was just to refer to the statute, which has an enforcement reference already built into the statute rather than creating our own crime or whatever infraction or whatever it might be. So if we choose to adopt that, that seems to be a solution for that concern. It's still not perfect in my view, but it's, you can only go so far. So I don't know if you had more.
Well, you'd hope that people have morals, right? No, I don't have anything further to say. I think you said that well.
Any other questions on that, or I agree as well. I think that makes the most sense and the easiest way to do it after talking with Sean as well.
So what you're referring to is the section where it begins violation of the Code of Ethics and then runs through the end. It has the process that would be gone through.
I don't know if you saw his communication, but I'd be happy to forward it.
Yeah, no, that's what it, yeah, I'm just
Whatever
stating
he
what it is.
suggests
Okay.
sounds adequate.
And so that would basically just refer to, it would just, instead of all of that, would just refer to RCW 4223050, kind of a sentence about that. Yep, beginning at the bottom of page 5. So
And
at
this
that,
applies to the mayor and city council.
all elected officials, all municipal elected.
Because it just says the mayor once, it's like the first page. So I just wanted to confirm.
It's, I'm sorry, it says what?
A third paragraph is the only reference I saw is to council members.
Oh, and just including the mayor,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
So I just want to confirm.
And for the record, I think it's important to note, well, the other question I had for the city attorney that we wanted an answer for was, what does this do with the existing ethics policy we have in place? And as it turns out, which I participated in a lot of years ago, that applies only to employees, not to electeds. And so, and I'm not sure that that applied to electeds or could be deemed to have applied to electeds based on an opinion that the city attorney gave back when we did the Quita thing. And so for me, that satisfied my curiosity is how do they merge? They don't necessarily need to merge. They just ought not be inconsistent, and I guess they're not. So if that helps.
Or conflicting.
Or conflicting, yeah.
So, am I hearing that council would like that section changed and then have this come back at a meeting with, under a resolution to adopt?
With the RCW.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's change that.
Is that, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Will do.
Thank you, Jeff.
And then any other updates, Jennifer?
I don't think I have any.
Excellent. All right.
Just a time.
Thank you. We're going to go to council comments and reports. So we're going to go around the room. Shannon, do you want to start us off here?
Sure. So I attended the Creative Gathering at the Black Pearl on 2/4. Made some excellent contacts, networking, met some nice folks from Northwest Natural Gas, hence my question to Steve concerning the tour that we're going to be doing shortly. Attended the vision workshop on 2/4 as well. I was really impressed with the folks that were at my table. They were kind of angry and upset to begin with, but when we got started in the process, we started placing, using the map and placing the sticky notes on the map, and they got to be part of that process. And in the end, it was like, okay, we really do have an opinion here. We really can, make things work the way we want them to. Just to have an opinion. So I saw that in action, and I really liked that, and so did they. Attended ribbon cutting ceremony at Lux Artistry. Downtown Camas Association was there, as were the mayor and some other folks. Let's see. Last Thursday, I got to go up to Olympia and spent the day with Vicki Kraft, 17th Legislative District Representative, and that was really awesome. I got to meet a lot of nice folks up there. I was introduced to the caucus and got to speak about Camas and our city here. It didn't do much damage, don't worry. So it was a good day. It was a good day for all of us. And just so the public knows, we did receive a communication from the public affairs manager, Christy Ward, from the mill, and she said that they will be doing several, $15 million worth of capital investments this year in the mill. So I won't go into each one of these, but they have extensive work that they're going to be doing. So please keep in mind that they're not going anywhere, and they're making sure everything works to make things better, to end pollution, minimize pollution, and wastewater, and a couple other good things. So I won't go into all that. So that's all I have right now.
Thank you.
Let me see. I also attended the CREDC annual meeting. I represent Camas on that committee, and they do a lot of hard work to promote Clark County and bring new businesses in and retain the current ones. I took the Camas Youth Advisory Club students to Olympia on the 6th, and we had a really full agenda. We met with Senator Cleveland's legislative assistant to talk about the I-5 corridor bridge, which was a big concern of the students. We talked with Representative Stonier and her legislative assistant. We talked to the legislative assistant for Brandon Vick, and we talked to Representative Hoff, who said several times how that group of kids keeps him on his toes, and he loves to meet with them because they always ask great questions. And I'll tell you, they bring out their laptops to see what they asked him last time, and they hold him accountable. Just saying. So they're quite impressive, and that was a very useful group to do and to have follow-up. And I guess I didn't do too much damage, or they didn't, because you would have heard about it. I also wanted to make sure, again, just to repeat that the Bee Haven Committee, which is the Camas City Bee Committee, will be hosting a sidewalk strip contest starting out March 6th and culminating with a judging in Labor Day weekend.
Sorry, what is it, sidewalk?
It's a sidewalk contest to revitalize your sidewalk strip. Could be pots in your patio or a piece of lawn, but the point is to plant flowers and plants that attract bees and butterflies, because bees all over the country and actually over the world are dying. So this is going to be a great contest. Anyone can participate. The library is going to be holding a series of training events, be many, many resources, so you'll see more starting March 6th at the First Friday. Then Greg and I will be having a award meeting in March on Saturday. Just a second.
21st.
Thank you. The 21st, it'll be at the Parker Street Fire Station. We're working on the agenda right now, but it'll be the first ward meeting of 2020, unless you guys are the weekend before.
We beat you.
Beat us second. Darn. So we're looking forward to hearing from a lot of public and having a good conversation, because that is the time you could ask any question and ask, and we'll have the right people there or follow up with you immediately. And I've had the opportunity to participate in the think tank. Well, kudos to everybody that participated from our community and spent the time on that. It kind of sums it up.
Thank you. Don?
I'll be brief. I went to the ribbon cutting, the 4:30 Friday ribbon cutting, and got there at about 4:25 and found that it was cut at 4:20. But I was there.
You know, they don't even really cut the rhythm. It's Velcroed together, I found out. Yeah, so you didn't,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, then I didn't.
Yeah, we can redo it any time.
The only thing that I had some committee meetings, there wasn't much of substance to share, so I won't. But the one thing is that, you know, we're all working with our partner in Washougal on the fire interlocal. You saw the email tonight from Chief that talked about deferring or delaying this joint council meeting. And the reason we're doing that is, and Steve's going to share the details of our meeting, but I just wanted to give a preface, Steve, if you don't mind.
Please.
And that is that I'm on both committees. I'm on the JPAC committee and the finance committee. And even though we can't meet at 6, it would become a public meeting and we'd have all kinds of protocols to go through. Not that we're trying to hide anything, but simply the challenge of doing that lent itself to us on the finance committee engaging some of the aspects that deal with the financial parts of it. And our thinking was that it would help the broader group, the JPAC group, contemplate some of the things we could do or couldn't do or shouldn't do advisably based on Camas's perspective of the financial aspects of it. So we started to use Ellen's term that she liked so much. We started to look at things in buckets. And I really want to give full credit to Bonnie and Steve for coming up with the idea of let's meet with Washougal's Finance Committee and let's sort out some of those things that we have in common and maybe some things that we see differently, and maybe we'll come up with ideas that will facilitate us accomplishing this process that we're going to try to go through. So rather than get ahead of ourselves and have a meeting before we've done that and so on and so forth, that's what we plan to do. But we spent a fair amount of time talking about these topics, and I just wanted to preface that, so I'll pass it to Steve for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're done with all your comments? Okay. I'm going to start at the top of my list so that I go down in order. Maybe I can read this stuff. GP Mill, yeah, that's the number 11 machine that they had that $15 million announcement on, and that's the hand towel operation that's over there. And as with other viruses that go around, the hand towel end of the business, now that you have a big virus going worldwide, has opportunity for more hand towels to be used. And they're making an investment, $15 million. It's a significant amount, and it's tied into the ecology of the river and better way to do business. And it's bright for the 300 jobs that are out there. That's nice to hear. I went to that CREDC, Columbia River Economic Development Association annual dinner, and quickly exited out of there to go to the North Shore Visioning Committee meeting along with everybody else. And I'll let the mayor talk about what took place there, but it was a great meeting on the North Shore, and I was at the ribbon cutting for Lux on February 7th, along with Shannon and Don and the mayor, and had a meeting on Tuesday, the February 11th, with Jerry Atchison, Steve Wall, and a couple of constituents, Judith Lawrence and Alan. I can't remember Alan's last name, but it was basically on the health of Lackey Lake. And we knew that Steve Wall and Jerry Atchison had made a visit to Clark County, 2 visits actually, and that the second time they visited to talk about Lackey Lake, they had a very large staff that kind of surprised them that was there from the county to actually talk about what the history of examining that lake, and amongst themselves they talked about potentials of moving forward. They asked an interesting question that kind of surprised Stephen and Jerry, and so I'm bringing it forward. They asked us if we would designate Lackey Lake as an area that we looked at as a city for swimming, boating, and fishing, which all take place now. But they would like to have us designate that lake for those recreational purposes inside Camas, and it gives them a little more firepower at the county level to go after more money and do some more examination of that lake. Judith Lawrence, that was with me, her and her daughter were at the Lackey Lake cleanup last fall, and they got sick cleaning up the lake. They did not report it to the health department, so we all asked them to do that. They did it last week to make that report. But there are things going on in that lake, not just Fallen Leaf Lake, but in Lackey Lake, that it would be best to get people that have a history of examining that lake to go back and look at as soon as possible. So I'm asking that we ask the Parks and Rec Commission to consider designating that and bring that proposal up to us so that we officially say that that lake is a recreational lake for swimming, fishing, and boating, so that it will officially go on to the county records. So that is one of the things I wanted to make sure I got across. I attended the February 13th think tank, and once again, I'm going to leave that to the mayor to go into detail on. The Finance Committee, we met twice, as Don said, and basically, when we were looking at it, the questions as the Finance Committee that we had were regarding the partnership with Washougal. Where is that going? The partnership with East County Fire and Rescue. Where is that going? The potential of a regional fire authority in the region. Where would that take us, and how? What are the plus and minus options on that? The current labor negotiations are taking place for the city of Camas on the fire, and so that all ties into those other issues that we just mentioned, and then to kind of make it even more interesting, East County Fire and Rescue is putting their fire facility up by the airport up for sale because they don't think it's in the right location. Let me see. And we talked about, we had a second meeting on Friday of this week. Cathy was there, the mayor was there, and Chief Swinhart was there, and we talked about all these issues and where we ought to go with them. And we talked about overtime and other cost containment issues that had come up. And we've once again decided to try to talk to the Finance Committee at Washougal to get that all on the table and consider where we can go and report back to you guys. So was at the DCA meeting, and Juxtaposition is going to have their official opening on March 13th. They're going to have a soft opening that happened this week. And then at the future ribbon cuttings, oh boy, this is going to go away. The future ribbon cuttings, they would like to have representatives from the City of Camas, the Chamber of Commerce, and the DCA be there. And so the three organizations are in concert with what we are talking about.
We help you.
Thank you very much. And then I was at the DCA meeting. You forgot to mention you're the prime one, and you go to all those DCA board meetings.
I didn't mention this.
Yeah, well, go ahead and mention that one. What? Okay. There were lots of other issues that were brought up at the DCA meeting. One of them being a study at that would come from the Washington State University. And it would look at the mill property, and it's kind of hazy as to what the Georgia Pacific's intents are for that property, but in terms of planning for the downtown, it's an important issue that DCA wanted us to consider having a staff member at, but right now, as it was brought up earlier, we've assigned them to focus on the North Shore and the transportation issues. Wanted to make sure you guys heard that. Spring house cleaning in downtown will take place April 26th. And the mural that's going up in downtown will hopefully be put up and have an official ceremony by the 1st of April, if everything is going as planned. And 3rd and Birch, on the crosswalk on 3rd and Birch, turns out to be an intersection where people are taking their lives in their hand to walk across the street. So they asked if we would look into further possibilities on making it safer for people crossing from one side to the other on 3rd and Birch. So, and our ward meeting is March 15th, Grass Valley Fire at 2 p.m. And that's it for me. Over to you. Oh, you get to do that. Do it.
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
So the Downtown Camas Association is having their yearly retreat retreat, Revitalize Washington in Wenatchee. And so I believe he mentioned, and they mentioned as well, that they would like a council member to go, and I may do that. So we look forward to having some good benefits from that.
Thank you. All right, Bonnie.
So Steve gave great comprehensive on our finance committee. We also met earlier today to talk about repairs for the Ledbetter House and how to finance that, as well as trails potentially around the properties on the North Shore area, now that we've acquired most of them. And then I also attended the North Shore Visioning workshop, which was really a good exercise for our citizens. I think they enjoyed it. After, as Shannon said, that some little trepidatious in the beginning, but I think they enjoyed the process. And then went to a library board of trustees meeting, which is always good, and they're an energized group and advocating for the library and all the wonderful things that it does. And then, yes, our Ward 2 meeting is March 15th at 2 p.m. at the Fire Station 42 on Parker.
Perfect, thank you. We still have a few minutes. One, I separated into JPAC and the finance, those two groups I thought was a really smart idea, and I think that will give us some more traction. I like that. And then the mural on the side of the building, we took a look of where that is. I think that's going to be amazing. I mean, it's going to be the history of Camas with some of the stories there. It's going to be right on Mel's or Universal Jiu-Jitsu's wall there, but I really like that, and I really like the more of the artwork as well the kids brought in. I just love bringing that aspect of it. When we bring the history to it, it's really nice. All right, so the North Shore Visioning meeting, went to that. I really liked the interacting. I liked that it was a different venue. I liked it in the school. It was just a bit more wider open. I liked the format of the tables. I thought the interaction was really good. The group, so then everyone went through and we kind of discussed it, and then the group at the end, we kind of put stickers at the end. The group with the most stickers were the Rebels with a Cause. I liked their name for their
But wasn't
group.
there like 14, 15 other advocates for change that had dots on them?
Totally. But the one that had, I mean, as far as the most,
Right.
like as
When
far
you
as the
have
voting goes.
one versus collectively 15 other, right? You have 15
different things.
Correct, different maps.
Plans.
Totally.
Collectively.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the rebels.
No. That was the one that got the most votes at the end. Like as far as the
Singly, but compared to the 15 collective advocating for change.
correct, absolutely. Yes, different variations that were there, but I think that was the one that got the most attention that was there, and they decided not to put any dots on the board, hence the rebel, I think, aspect of it. But I think again, it's a good conversation around that downtown, and mentioned that as far as the mill goes, don't know what that entails. They've invested another $15 million in there. I'm looking forward to going to a tour, and I think you're going to be going with me as well, Shannon. We're going to go do a tour of the mill, and we have to get all the paperwork through. I think it's in Atlanta, and whatnot, but we got approved, I believe. And start developing those relationships with myself, just to kind of understand what all those kind of things are, because I think there is no kind of time frames, and as far as planning goes, we're looking at where we need to plan now. But I think it's also the exercise I thought was really good. I wasn't sure how it was going to kind of come off, or how I'm not a visual. I mean, I'm visual, but I like to see things. I like to understand what it's going to look like versus kind of the mapping out. But again, I thought it was a very well done event, and I liked the location that was there. I think there is some more conversation, even explaining. I think as I kind of talk to different people, part of the education process for me is to fully understand, and I'm still just barely kind of understanding it, but I definitely think there's still more opportunities there to make sure that we understand what all the options are, and why we're doing certain things, and what happens if we don't do certain things, and what happens with that, because we don't have to. I mean, we don't have to do the North Shore plan up there either, but then ultimately what's going to happen then at that point if we're not planning for that. The other meeting that we had was around the think tank. Again, great interaction, I thought, between the community and Ellen and the library team and all the department heads, as well as thank you for your help and thank you for your help as well. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. There's a lot of information now that we're kind of just now starting to go through. So it's once we, literally just going through all the information right now, but once we start to kind of fine tune it and put it, as you like to do, Ellen, into buckets, we'll be able to get that out and kind of really kind of see what we got from that and what the next steps are. And we already kind of discussed some things that we'll do a little bit differently as we kind of continue on, as we open that up to the entire community as well and the entire group. The last thing that I had was just a note that I made around the AKS engineering contract that we're putting forth. It's just an idea around hiring an urban forests service person, like an arborist of sorts. That would be, I think, advantageous. It would cut down the need for that. We'd have someone that could do that. But as we continue on, I think there could be huge advantages and cost savings as well. But having someone that could represent the city and ensure that, so just something I'm throwing out there as well as we kind of talk through it.
Just an addition there, one of the things the City of Vancouver does really well is they have a group of AmeriCorps volunteers that are staff their urban forestry group. So it requires management. So you got to have someone that's available to do that. But they put on all sorts of workshops for the community, and they work on planning, and they have special projects, and it's a good way to bring in expertise. It's affordable, and then they switch out every year. It's a year type contract.
Great. I think that's, and again, thanks for showing up the think tank, thanks for showing up the visioning meeting as well. That's really all I had on
Can I
that.
throw one more thing in here?
You sure can.
Yeah, I think for all of us, you guys were awesome.
You're awesome.
You guys really pulled it off. The two prime meetings there, the North Shore and the think tank, you guys were great. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're 5 minutes left. We have another opportunity for public comments. If anyone would like to address the council, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak, and I will remember to press the button. You're getting sucker punched there.
I won't be 3 minutes.
I'm still going to press the button.
Hello, Scott McElhaney, 4227 Northwest Sage Loop in Camas. I've been here about 19 years, traveled most of my career, so I've kept in touch with you guys virtually, and I think it's great what you guys do, and thanks to the city, you guys do some wonderful things, and although I don't know each one of you, I know who you are from articles and word of mouth and other, but relative to the lake, I think that's a great idea. I think we should designate it exactly how you say. It's one of the most beautiful areas around here, but the lake itself just seems really terrible at times. Right? And the comment you made about the building, I think is great. The communication, I think it was brilliant to buy the building. It was a little disappointing for the additional funds, but in the grand scheme of things, I think the opportunity cost for buying that building was a great idea. The Code of Ethics, I think, is also it's a good idea. I think just the perception of it being available to you and following it. Relative to ex-officials, I don't understand why we would have that in there. I'm sure they're held to NDAs forever if there was any information that they shouldn't disclose. So I don't know why we would bring it to X. But anyway, thank you very much for being here. I know how much work you guys do on that, other than being part of these meetings. But thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
What was
wasn't even going to talk tonight, but I got 3 quick things from the meeting. Wayne Pattison, 2919 Southeast 2nd Avenue. The Bank of America building, Phil, the thing I'm getting from people is they don't even know what the city's going to do with it. So I think the permit center, just make sure everybody knows that there's some reason why it's there. North Shore planning, a lot of folks don't understand that if you don't plant it, it's going to get built anyway, because like the Johnstone Dairy, they'll sell it and so planning isn't a bad thing up there. That's not picking on Randy's idea of working on something on the mill, but we need that planning. And I don't remember what the third one was.
Come back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? See no more public comments. This meeting is adjourned. We got one back there.